Welcome, Jess. As somebody who struggled with morning sickness with both my pregnancies, I am really, really excited to talk to you about how we can prevent or reduce this. It's something that I wish I had learned about 8 years ago. But before we get into it, can you tell us something that you did today to take care of you?
Hmm. Well, on a busy morning with school and everything, there's not too much time, but I made myself a hot cacao, which is like a heart-opening drink here in Mexico. And I just sat down and kind of, decompressed for 10 minutes before and drank this. And hopefully that just opens everything and yeah, allows an easy flow today.
Mhm. Yeah, it doesn't have to be big things that we do that help ourselves and nourish ourselves, right? That's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing to do in the morning. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how it is that you got into working with women to reduce and prevent morning sickness? It's quite a unique area.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. And I guess I kind of felt called to step into that because of how little support there was. My kind of health story is that I was, an athlete growing up. I was really healthy. I ate really well as part of my sport because weight was involved in my sport was wrestling. And, first got into physiotherapy. I went overseas to do school there. I ended up just having sort of a decline in my health a little bit. And definitely that it was exacerbated when I got back into Canada. So I was going from, being an athlete at the time, playing rugby and doing martial arts in England. And then I came back and it was like I vacuumed and I needed a nap sort of thing. I had some autoimmune symptoms, lots of them that just kept popping up. And I spent 3 years trying to get answers to these and really didn't get anywhere. I had my light bulb moment when I was back sitting in my doctor's office and said, look, my symptoms are so persistent. They're all the time. This has to be doing like something that I'm doing so frequently, or nutrients I'm missing or something. And the doctor just looked at me and said, we don't consider nutrition as part of medicine. And that was my like aha moment, because how could it not be involved in some way? So I ended up taking a diploma in nutritional therapy and epigenetics, learning how genes can be turned on and off through food and diet and lifestyle factors. And I reversed my my autoimmune symptoms at that point and really went on to feeling so much healthier, just through nutrition, lifestyle, sleep quality and hygiene, and just kind of hitting all the basics and really getting those dialed in. So fast forward, I get pregnant. I end up having HG. At the beginning, I didn't know that I had HG. I just had severe morning sickness and ended up in the hospital a few times for IV fluids and medications just to kind of hit the reset button a little bit because of how bad some days were compared to others. And by my third or fourth visit, they were really kind of like, why aren't you taking the medications? You shouldn't be in here if you've been taking the medications we prescribed. And it just didn't sit well with me that these medications aren't tested in pregnancy. We don't really know the real effects. And surely my body's doing this for some reason. I just needed to kind of connect the dots. So fast forward a few weeks, and I am kind of in my small little windows of feeling not horrific. I would try to think about it, right? But there's not a lot of time for thinking when you're really that sick. And I came across a comment on a post about histamine and morning sickness from Dr. Ben Lynch. And a light bulb went off. The medication that they were giving me was antihistamine combined with B6. He was saying there was a connection with histamine. If I could mimic the process of the medication that was helping to improve my symptoms naturally, then maybe I could get somewhere and not have to take the medication. So that's sort of what I did. I put together a plan. Researching and connecting the dots again, like I said, around histamine in my case, and just really saying like, okay, what am I going to do here? I want to reduce how much is coming in. I want to help my body metabolize it and get it out and set my plan into motion. And by day 3, I threw up once and I never threw up again in the rest of my pregnancy. And by third trimester, I was like the best I felt in years. I got the pregnancy glow, everything was coming around, and yeah, that was sort of my experience, and just realizing that there was no care that really got to the root of the issue. Hearing things like, your baby's a parasite, it'll feed off of you and you just have to survive, you'll be fine, sort of thing, from doctors. And then just hearing other women's stories and knowing that it can be even so much worse than I experienced it, and I was completely debilitated by it. So yeah, I just feel like it's an underserved area, and that's why I've kind of directed my knowledge into that area.
That's incredible and amazing that in only a few days you're able to see such an improvement.
Yeah, yeah,
How
definitely
many
a big
weeks along
relief.
were you? Yeah, I bet.
I think it was around 25 weeks.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So, in terms of morning sickness and HG, what's the difference between those? Because sometimes the terms are used interchangeably. Often, morning sickness can kind of just be like first trimester.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's really, this is a bit of a sticking point that comes up because HG moms hate to hear that people are calling it morning sickness. And rightfully so, because it is really like next level debilitating. But people don't know the difference. And so morning sickness is actually a term we can use to connect to these women who are experiencing HG and don't yet know that that term exists or don't have doctors who inform them of that. So morning sickness really is, I would say, like, think of it as an inconvenience. You know, you're waking up in the morning, you don't feel great, perhaps you're sick once, you know, maybe twice, but that's not consistent. That's not your all day, every day. You're gaining weight, you're able to eat and drink. It's just you have periods where those things don't sound good to you. HG is different in that it's a much more severe case, and women often, because of how nauseous they are, actually can't end up eating or drinking. And so, especially in the first trimester, they begin to lose weight. And if they lose 5% of their body weight, you know, that's a mild to moderate case. If it's 10% or more, you're into the more severe case. So for me, I was about 125 pounds. I lost 15 pounds in the first few weeks because I was not able to eat or drink or get anything of substance in. Typically, they say you're vomiting 3 or more times a day, and you're just really debilitated by the condition. So that can range from difficulty caring for your other children to being unable to, you know, really move around your house, bathe yourself, clean yourself, feed yourself. And it sounds, and some people, you know, in comment sections are like, oh, that sounds dramatic in a sense, but I liken it to if you've ever had a stomach flu and you know you're about to be sick and you've kind of got that minute before you're sick and you're like, oh my God, I need to get to the bathroom because it's coming. I also don't want to move because the second I move, it's going to come. And you're just kind of in that frozen state. That's kind of the state for me that I experienced with HG. I would sit for hours just holding my lips closed on the couch, you know, each day just passing it by and counting, you know, I'm on day 74 and I have 120 to go, or whatever the numbers were, and just feeling so defeated by the, you know, that imbalance for how many more days I had to go through this, not seeing that I was at the halfway point or further and not hitting those milestones. So yeah, that would kind of be the difference in that. And the severity can be that women end up needing to be hospitalized, either just, you know, intermittently for IV fluids, more severely for nutritional needs through an IV or feeding tube. The mental load is really huge with HG. Lots of women have trauma, obviously, around it. First, from the experience of, you know, vomiting. I mean, I would vomit 30 times a day sometimes. And so that is traumatic, but then going to the doctor and being really like dismissed and being told it's morning sickness, or, you know, like I said, your baby is a leech. It's going to take everything. You're just going to be fine. Go home and deal with it for the rest of the pregnancy. And 1 in 3 babies are actually lost to HG because of the significance of the toll it takes on the mom, the nutrient deficiencies, and also because of terminations of wanted pregnancies. So moms really want this baby, but it is almost a matter of life and death for her, or she's completely unable to take care of her other children in her family. So the option comes up around that. And I think I read a statistic yesterday that close to 50% have at least thought of suicide during this time. So it's pretty significant in terms of the difference between HG and morning sickness.
And with the causes, like those underlying reasons, is it similar for people who experience morning sickness and HG, or is it quite different that morning sickness is just like a normal part of pregnancy and HG is telling us that there's other things to look at?
Yeah, I would say you're never going to have a completely, maybe you will. Some people do. But the rule, like, I wouldn't set the expectation that you have no nausea, no food aversions, fatigue, vomiting ever in pregnancy. I do think there is a healthy and normal level as your hormones rise before that placenta is developed. And, again, it should feel inconvenient to have. So I would say, yes, there is morning sickness that's part of a normal pregnancy. And why some women maybe experience HG versus morning sickness is a culmination of factors. I've kind of reduced it down to 8 core areas in my program. But these overall, I would say, are toxicities, imbalances, and deficiencies in your body that your body is trying to correct for. There's also, the experience of emotional trauma, and we can get into all these things more in depth as we continue the conversation. But I have some women that are like, oh, I've done all the things, I'm healthy, I eat organic, I do whatever, and I still got morning sickness, or I still got HG. And there is some deeper rooted layers to it, definitely. So it's individual, right? There's hormones, there's how well does your body get toxins out, how long have you been harboring toxins or imbalances, and then what does that, it's really individual in that sense. But definitely, we're seeing a big difference in the root causes between the two.
Okay. And before we get into those 8 core areas, because I'd love to hear more about that, but I'm just wondering, are there some basic steps that all women can take to reduce the likelihood that they're going to experience HG? Or, like you say, is it just individual for every person? So I might experience, or I might be experiencing it because of deficiency, somebody else's trauma, or like, is there something that we can all kind of work on just to have like a healthy base level going into this, not knowing what our specific causes are?
Yeah, without knowing specific causes, I would say there are key areas that women really do need to prioritize, and it would reduce the risk. So adequate protein intake, diet culture through the 90s and the 2000s, and then, the just the news and how they structure information around nutrition and health agencies is really not great. My doctor said they studied it for a day when they were saying, like, we don't consider nutrition. But yet we're kind of basing what we should be eating and our knowledge off of that without doing further research. So I would definitely say adequate protein intake, women to try to achieve 100 to 120 grams would be great. It is weight dependent. Usually you want a gram per pound, ideally, of body weight. So someone who's 120 would be wanting to get 120. I typically try to get women to start at 100 to 120 because many of them are not reaching that. Some are getting 20 grams of protein in a day. And these are the building blocks for our hormones. These are the breakdown, they break down into amino acids, which is what our liver needs to detoxify us. So we're getting these backlogs of symptoms that are happening after years of, inadequate protein intake as one of the things. So I'd say protein intake, mineral intake, our water, our food, our soil just isn't as rich in minerals, and we need those. I think it's wild how many health conditions are medicated when they're really like a morning or a mineral deficiency. So I would say definitely trying to be intentional about minerals. We're never taught, they're not on nutrition labels, yet they're as essential as vitamin C or anything like that, right? So minerals, proper sleep, getting outside, those are just some of the foundational things. Like those are really easy pieces. And magnesium, I would say in women who experience morning sickness, it's, I think, like a 78%. I'd have to look back on the statistic, or I'm sure it's changing, but it's between 70 and 80% of women who experience morning sickness also have magnesium deficiency. So that's an easy one to assume that you fall into that category and to support yourself that way.
Yeah, those are all things that I think would benefit anybody, whether you're trying to reduce your chances of getting morning sickness or HG or just to be healthier. And I know for myself, when I started increasing my mineral intake and my water specifically, I just had more energy and clarity through my day just by changing that one thing. It was amazing.
It's insane how many people will message me after like 3 or 4 days and be like, am I supposed to feel like way more energetic and be sleeping better? And I'm like, yep, that's like, it can happen that quick for you.
So good. It doesn't have to be hard, does it?
No. In fact, we overcomplicate so many of these things. I think we feel like a lot of medical conditions are complex. So we look for complex solutions when really we're glazing over the essentials that we need just on a daily basis to maintain, a state of ease rather than dis-ease.
Mhm. Yeah. So when you were talking about those 8 core areas that can make us more likely to experience HG, can you go into some detail on that? You touched on toxicity and trauma and imbalances, but I'd love to hear more about them.
Yeah. So when I'm going through working with my clients, I typically address their liver and their gallbladder function. This is because your liver is really key in detoxifying. Your liver and gallbladder produce your bile that helps, with your digestion, with your hormone metabolism. There's lots of like your liver is needed for so many things. So we kind of address that and work to optimize that. Your gut health, again, they're kind of interlinked. All of these things really are interlinked once you get into it. There's not one that I could even just like isolate out and identify without it falling into another category. So gut health, making sure that you're optimally digesting your food and that, you're not becoming nutrient deficient just because of, even though you're taking it in, but you're not converting that into usable energy because your digestion is poor. So optimizing for that, external toxins in your home. So kind of doing an audit of your home, different ways that, I have lots of suggestions on how you can make small investments, big investments, free choices, to kind of optimize your home so that you're not continually being bombarded by toxins in your home that are increasing that burden on your liver. And internal toxins. So a lot of women, again, H. pylori is really linked to this. So identifying just how, like, what potential toxicities or microbes or bacteria or viruses are living in your body and how to cleanse those out. So many of those can be silent. And in my autoimmune issues, I ended up going and having bioresonance testing. And when I did, he was like, oh, you have a really high concentration of this virus in your spleen. And when I looked up that virus, it was exactly my symptoms to a T, right? So I had been going to like infectious disease doctors because they thought maybe it was mumps or different things because my glands were so swollen in my neck. It was like I had golf balls under my skin, just one of my symptoms. And they kept thinking that it was something like infectious disease related. And it never got picked up. And then later, when I did that scan, that's when that came up. So we can have these things kind of lingering in our body that our body just doesn't have adequate resources to clear out fully. And then, so I think I'm at 4 there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then nutrient deficiencies is another one. And that can range. I mean, I have resources I've created. Even I've created ebooks just for anyone to download that has one's all vitamins and then one's all the minerals. And they're information about each one. And then also a checklist of like 20 different symptoms if you're deficient, and you can kind of check. And then you get like, is this likely? Is it not likely for you? Just so that if you had kind of a self-assessment tool. So we do work around the nutrient deficiencies and addressing those. And in particular, certain nutrients are really, the deficiency causes nausea and vomiting, right? So those are the key ones we really want to address in the morning sickness picture. And hormone balance. So we want to be really working on hormone balance. Again, excess estrogen in the body is going to put more stress on the liver because your liver has to push that out through your bile and then through your bladder or bowels. So we're working on that. And energetics and emotions. So going through, where is physical energy held in the body? Where is certain emotions held in the body? I'm often listening to my clients as they talk and writing down each time they say an emotion. And then I look back after to like the body chart in traditional Chinese medicine and correlate them, and then start to get an idea of like, how does that relate to the organ system? So for example, like if you're feeling angry, resentful, irritable, short-tempered, like those things are affiliated with the liver. So if I hear somebody that's saying, I'm like so moody typically before my periods, or I have mom rage and I don't need to, and I feel guilty after, I'm writing down like rage, guilt, like, and I'm kind of just keeping a tally on these things when I go through with my clients. And then we go to genetics. So genetics tends to get most of the blame for especially HG. More research has come out that they're linking this certain hormone and certain genes to hyperemesis gravidarum. And I think that is nice information to have. But when you study epigenetics, you learn that up to 95% can be modified with those genes, or upregulated and downregulated based on what environmental factors and nutritional factors you provide your body. So while genes do take a lot of the weight, and I think that's because it's easy to blame something else and then realize, and that medicine kind of can continue with this story around like, you need us, rather than like genes are an issue here and you have 95% control over how those genes are expressed, and this is how you would optimize for that. I think we don't get given that information, so we go through that obviously in my course and my teachings and my clients as well. So those are kind of the 8 categories, and it would be like a ranking system of which ones are individual to you versus me.
Wow, that's really comprehensive. And how do you work with mothers to figure out like which ones are really affecting them? You're talking about listening to what emotions they're talking about and experiencing, but what are some other ways? Like, do you do blood work to see nutrient deficiencies, or how do you
No,
decipher
so
what's what for them?
I have a lot of clients that come to me that have done some level of testing, and I'm on the fence. There's a few tests that I think are good in the time of you already being pregnant and experiencing morning sickness. There's like, let's just get to work. You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to test for and wait for and like be like, okay, that's great at that point in time? Or when you're like, I'm pregnant, I'm getting pregnant next month, because I do have a lot of clients that come to me. So what I like to do is, honestly, I feel as a practitioner, obviously I have many skills to continue to grow and information that I can still pile into this brain, hopefully. But I have a really unique background. And so it allows me to really pull these pieces of the puzzle out. I spent 10 years in university studying anatomy and physiology. And what was missing was connecting the dots and really taking the time over the last 7 or 8 years to learn traditional Chinese medicine and German new medicine. And herbal medicine has really allowed me to connect all of those things and see the picture. Whereas I think if I had not taken those other things, we're really siloed in education around topics. Like, again, I went through my master's in physiotherapy, you're a chiropractor, like we get taught sort of like the physical body, right? And not always are we taught, definitely in physio more so, about the emotional body, the organs that are underneath, all of these different layers. So the part of it is my intuition. Another part is your intuition. So I really like to try to have like, and it's an intro module like in my course too, of how do you tap into your intuition? How do you listen to that voice that goes like, oh, I might be onto something here, or that, okay, that sounds kind of like interesting, right? When you get those little pings or light bulbs that go off, I always say that's your body saying like, yes. So to follow that, and then we really round it out with muscle testing. So I teach how to muscle test so that you can get answers from your body. So muscle testing is a form of energetic communication with your subconscious. Your body knows whether something is intuitively good or bad for you. And it's about how do we get those skills to ask our body those questions. So yeah, those are kind of the layers that I add in. And like I said, some people do come with testing. There's only a few handful tests that I'm like, the information we get from this is more valuable than the expense of the test. And so if someone's like, I'm going to get pregnant in a year and I really want to be super robust, then that's when testing kind of comes into play.
I like that you jump right into it because every day struggling with this is hard, right? So if you can reduce
Yeah,
that, go for it, right?
absolutely. And I mean, in the HG community, so many moms right now are super excited that there was medical breakthroughs in finding that GDF15 link to HG. And that's awesome and that's great. And we need medical advancements, but they will not have a solution for many years because now they will have to find out more correlations about that, find out how to mute or suppress that via medication, go through trials for that medication. And, it might be 5 years, 10 years. I don't know, things are getting faster before they find a medication. And that medication is likely to just suppress the symptom, right? So if we're suppressing HG and we're not correcting for those imbalances, we're not reducing those toxicities, what's happening to the baby? What environment are we allowing to stay in our body to grow that baby in? I think we need to start listening to the innate intelligence of our body and trying to find somebody who can help us decipher the messages.
Yeah, do you see that HG is our body communicating with us that something's wrong and that we need to figure out what that is so we can be healthy ourselves and create the most optimally healthy baby?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of things when I talk to the women, so many of them, when I ask, did you have any health issues prior to pregnancy? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, great. Were your periods painful? Or did you have PMS or mood swings? They're like, oh, yeah. Could you tell when you were ovulating because of physical symptoms other than just discharge? Yeah. Right. So I'm already starting to be like, okay, potentially some hormone imbalances because those hormones are elevated to the point of being symptomatic, and asking about any allergies, seasonal food allergies, intolerances, history of skin issues or rashes, headaches. There's all these like small signs that we don't really appreciate because they're so common, not normal, but common, right? And so then we get into pregnancy, and the body is trying its best to protect the baby from all of that. And everything is amplified and magnified in pregnancy. So we just see this like large uptick in how aggressive the body is in communicating those signs and symptoms to us. So I believe that HG is our body's way of protecting the baby. If we have to potentially purge histamines or create electrolyte imbalances by being sick, or we have food aversions because we need certain nutrients. Many women are like, all I can eat is carbs, or I just want like, usually I'd eat healthy, but I want Pop-Tarts sort of thing. And my body's like, I'm starting to think in that scenario that your body either needs continued sustained energy, which it's not getting from the form of adequate nutrition. And so it's looking for the fastest route to that, right? Which is sugar and carbohydrates. Or your blood sugar is so up and down that your body is trying to self-correct through craving sugar to bring back up your blood sugar. So again, ways that we can listen to our body and start to just change and optimize in small steps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So can you talk a little bit about the histamines? Because this is what one of your main causes. Why are histamines an issue and how do they correlate with HG?
Yeah, so histamine is a normal immune response, right? We need it. Certainly, we want it to flush and bring certain cell types to an area where there's either been an injury or a bite or something foreign. But histamines can also be elevated. And so, histamine is really, there's this theory called the histamine bucket theory. And it's about like, if I have this cup right here, how much am I putting into this cup versus how much can drain out the bottom and get out of our body? And if those are adequate and balanced, then this cup never overflows. If there's too much going in and not enough, drainage on the other end, then certainly we are going to have an overflow and an excess. And that's where symptoms start to resolve or come up. So we're seeing nausea, vomiting as two signs, headaches, rashes, skin issues, things like that. So histamine becomes more amplified because histamine is a byproduct of estrogen. And in pregnancy, obviously, we know we have an uptick in our hormone production. And also the placenta produces histamine. It's one of the kidneys and the placenta are the two biggest producers of histamine. So the placenta is producing this to help modulate immune response, protect so that the mom's like certain cells don't come to the baby and see them as foreign. There's a lot of good reasons we need this, but if we are not metabolizing and getting out histamine well, if we have a lot of other, say, allergens or stimulus that are driving up that histamine response, we have too much going on and the body can't process it out. So yeah, that becomes really relevant and pertinent in pregnancy.
Yeah, I never knew that connection until recently, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
So what about nutrient deficiencies? What are the common ones that you see are correlated with HG and even morning sickness in general?
So this is, I would say the ones that I already kind of hit on are big ticket items. Protein, obviously being like a macronutrient. Minerals, there is over 100 different minerals, and many of them are essential that we need every day. And I don't think anyone probably listening to this right now has thought about how much potassium or manganese they've gotten in today in their diet, right? So minerals in general and understanding minerals is a big piece. Magnesium, like I said, again, there's a high correlation between that. Magnesium is needed in times of stress. Pregnancy is a stress on the body, albeit a good one. But adding the layer of morning sickness is also more stressful. So magnesium, B vitamins, I see B vitamins a lot because it's estimated now that 50-ish, I would say probably 60 at least percent of the population has what we call polymorphisms or SNPs on their MTHFR gene. And this gene is responsible for converting in through a process called methylation B vitamins. So it's basically going to add some like a little tag to that vitamin that allows it to be attached to a receptor site in the body. And what can happen is if we aren't getting whole food forms of that or methylated forms of that already, if we're getting synthetic B vitamins, and we can even think that we're not, but they're spraying grains in North America with synthetic folate and synthetic vitamins to enrich them. So processed foods are enriched with synthetic forms that our body can't potentially utilize. They can't bind to those receptors because of this mutation on our gene, which is not as scary as it sounds. But in that case, we have a lot of that nutrient floating around in our bloodstream, but it's actually not being able to be used by the body. And so we're getting marked deficiencies in B vitamins, and one of which is obviously folate. And folate is in almost all prenatals created in synthetic form called folic acid. So if 60% of moms can't absorb and utilize folic acid, and that's what they're taking in their prenatal, and that's creating a hidden deficiency of actual folate in the background, that has impacts on both the pregnancy, but also that is really important in neural tube development. And so we're seeing a big uptick in tongue ties, in like fascial tension of the baby, in cranial tension of the baby, different things along that midline deficit, colic, digestive distress, because that midline didn't have the adequate resources needed for full and optimal development in pregnancy based on these deficiencies.
Yeah, so it's not just affecting us, it's affecting our babies.
It's affecting our babies and our babies' babies. Like genetics is kind of, once it's changed, we pass down those genes, right? So we can absolutely understand and modify and change our diet to support that. So in the case of the MTHFR, we would want to be ensuring that we're always getting whole food forms. If we are getting synthetic, we're getting ones that have already done that conversion process. And in that case, we now have adequate levels of that nutrient. And so the effect of that gene not being able to convert is not as pronounced. But if I am carrying a little girl inside of me, she's carrying her ovaries and her eggs for her child inside. And so we really ought to be doing a better job at supporting women during this phase, because the next two generations are literally like their blueprint and their entire makeup is happening during this time. And if we're ignoring our body's cry for help, we're medicating our symptoms away, and then we're eating for two in whatever form that looks like, and never taught to nourish our body during this time. What is the snowball effect of that? Really, we can only, I get a guess and assume.
Yeah, it's not great.
Not at all.
Cultures around the world used to really focus on whole foods for married couples, so they would like get ready for having a baby. And it's something that we've really lost in this day and age, that people don't necessarily plan for pregnancy. I think that's a trend that is starting to happen again, but it's still not like a social norm. So hopefully that becomes just normal again, that we focus on really key nutrient dense foods leading into pregnancy. So not only do we maybe not have HG, but we also just help those babies develop as best they can.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that these problems are only on the rise, right? Because there's an overburden of toxicities that we have to cope with that we didn't before, from pollution to the chemicals that are in our products to the decreasing quality of food. There's so many different avenues that our bodies are like, oh, not another hit sort of thing, right? And then there's a lack of the education. So it's estimated that 3% of pregnancies have hyperemesis gravidarum. I would say it's probably 10%. I know more women than not who are in bed, for the bulk of their first trimester, throwing up every single day. And whether that's a mild case of HG or whatever, it's still like, we wouldn't have come this far as a population if pregnancy was so debilitating and so challenging for us. So we need to start asking questions and wonder why this is coming up more and more and more.
Yeah, it does seem like it's on the rise. It's becoming
Yeah.
more like common, even though it
Mhm.
shouldn't be normal. So when you talk about toxins, you're saying that there's toxins in our environment, and then there's like toxins more within us. So those are like bacteria or H. pylori, or like there's so many other yeasts and things that are there. What do you recommend that we do in terms of, I guess it's two questions. What can we do to support our bodies so we don't have all these creatures harboring in our bodies? And then the second question would be, what can we do to reduce exposure to toxins in our environment?
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of an individual answer. So it's hard for me to give like super blanket advice. That would be, not great. It depends on what it is. So if it's something like we suspect parasites, and parasites can imbalance our immune system. And so with parasites, we typically have a lot more histamine issues. We can have IBS, we can have liver dysregulation, just because like there's a certain type that's called a fluke and it can stay inside our liver. We can often see worsening symptoms at night. Full moon, the teachers that are like, oh, it's a full moon, the kids are all going to go crazy. Most, like, that's the highest time of activities for parasites and bugs inside our body. And so if we're seeing that being a case, we could potentially do a cleanse. There's a few different cleanses that I like to recommend. And again, not every person is going to benefit from this. The Rogers Hood cleanse is one that I use because it's herbal, it's natural, and it does target yeast, heavy metals, and parasites based on the herbal profile of the tinctures. So I do have a code for that. It's TWE. I think, yeah, just TWE, the wellness element. Sometimes my codes have 10 on the end, but I think it's just TWE. So someone who intuitively feels like that might be something could do a cleanse ahead of time, obviously not when you're pregnant. There is a company that I've recently spoken to the owner of, and she has created a cleanse that is pregnancy and breastfeeding safe. Again, I always say go with your intuition and your gut. Not everybody wants to cleanse, and this is a debate, right? Are the toxins better undisturbed inside of you when you're growing your baby, or are they better outside of you, but there might be some disruption, or like you might kick up dust sort of thing in a construction site? So that's typically the why you don't cleanse during pregnancy, because you're releasing these toxins from your cells and now they're floating around your bloodstream, and they have more of an ability to recreate damage to our cells or to create illness and things like that, because they're more volatile at that stage. But she has hundreds or thousands of women who are doing this. So I use your best judgment. She is only organics, and her cleanses are like a gut rebalancing, microbiome rebalancing kit. And again, TWE10, I think, is the discount code for her. Those are two cleansing options that you could consider. I range. So if you're in my course, it's going to be like, we can start with teas, and you can make your own tea. You could make your own herbal infusion, with different herbs. So star anise is like a herb that's pregnancy and breastfeeding safe. It's antifungal, it's antimicrobial, it's like really broad based, meaning it's kind of like good for a lot of things. So you could just start with making your own herbal infusion of that tea and taking that daily and hoping that that kind of does some stuff. If we're thinking heavy metals, ingredients like cilantro are really good, or chlorella for pulling certain heavy metals out of the body. So it's all targeted based on what ends up coming up when we're working together. So I have a lot of quizzes and questionnaires. So I think there would be one for parasites, there would be one for heavy metals. So it's about identifying those and working through that, working through the appropriate sort of offering for that. If that answers your
Amazing.
question.
Yeah, no, that's so thorough. That is incredible. So many things that you can do, whether you're planning on getting pregnant or whether you already are pregnant. What about in terms of those toxins that we're exposed to, like in our house and just in our environment? Like you say, there's just so many things out there. Is it just about reducing exposure? Is that what you recommend?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, you could totally, if you're in a mold infested house, maybe moving is an option. Maybe it's not, right? But certainly we want to be addressing mold as a big issue. Um, Small things, opening your windows every day. We don't realize that like our couch is sprayed with chemicals. And this is not to be like, oh my God, my house is toxic and I have to be super fearful. But it's about like, once we know better, we can choose better, and we can start each time we need a new product, right? So if I know like my hand soap has fragrance in it, and fragrance is endocrine disrupting and can impact potential like development in reproductive organs, then maybe I like the next time I'm out, I buy something that's more natural. There's two apps. There's more, probably there's lots now, but there's one app called Think Dirty. And then online, there's the EWG Skin Deep app. So you can actually type in your products and get a rating and find what ingredients are toxic and harmful. And you can even find substitutions there. I have lots of recommendations if anyone's listening and ends up wanting to be like, what shampoo do I take? And actually, that's one of the benefits that, like, in my working with my clients, the people who do my one-to-one support, they kind of have me in their pocket. So I have women that are like, I'm in the grocery store, what shampoo of these? Like, is this a yes or is this a no, sort of thing. So yeah, it's about finding better and safer options each time you kind of go, and really recognizing how toxic they are. I actually ended up, I was importing from the States like a tallow based company that I really loved, and I ended up recognizing how expensive it was to import with duty and everything else, and I created like a whole tallow line just so that I had like purely clean skincare and body care that I could put around my baby and not worry like, oh my God, is this leaching from my face into my breast milk and then he's drinking it? So it's just all one thing at a time, but being intentional each time you have to make another choice.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how we do it, right?
Yeah.
What's your skincare line called?
Oh, it's called Aura Apothecary. And yeah, it's a tallow based skincare, super nutrient dense because also that's the fat. So it has vitamins A, D, K, and E in it. So it can really, especially people who do have poor liver or gallbladder health, they maybe haven't been breaking down fats as well and getting those nutrients out. So it's a way to topically apply almost like a multivitamin in some senses. And a lot of other products on the market use essential oils. And I didn't want that. I wanted to have like full control over what's going into it. So I found a local farm that grows organic and naturally, and I infuse them all into the oils that I put into the products. So everything is handcrafted from me. 100% natural, locally sourced wherever I can find it, and just about as clean as I can possibly make it.
That sounds amazing. Tallow just feels the best on your skin, doesn't it?
Oh,
Nothing
yeah.
competes with that.
It's funny, actually, last night I was just doing some content for my page and I was reading back some of my reviews and I was like, oh God, yeah, like the people who've tried it, they're like, how do I like look younger in 3 days or this or that? And it's because we're crying out for these nutrients, right? And now we give them to our body and our skin's like bounces back so quickly. Like we don't realize how quick, whether it's topically or internally, our body wants to heal. It was like it always like everything in nature has like a flourish program. It doesn't have like a self-destruct program in terms of its growth and development. It's just what impedes that, right? And so these things are all barriers to our optimal health, but our body definitely wants to get there. So it's once we support it, it can move pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Was there anything else on this topic of HG and morning sickness that you wanted to cover here that we didn't address?
Um, I don't know. I don't think there's too much. I mean, I just really do want to drive home the point that I'm not like, I don't ever want women to feel ashamed for taking the medications that they need to. And it's their survival mechanism. And absolutely that's the case. But I would just really encourage women to use, and like this applies for anything like autoimmune disease, illness, right? Let's start looking at medications as a bridge or like something that serves to give us a window of time where we feel better so that we can address the root causes underneath, because certainly that's what's going to move the needle. That's what's going to impact both our health, our children's health, is actually asking why and getting curious with the why. And so if we can use that temporarily to provide relief, and all of a sudden from that relief, we can start to take in nutrients, we can, address some of these underlying factors, we can really move the needle. So just thinking about it that way.
Yeah, there are times when we just need that bridge, like you say, to be able to feel that much better, to be able to then look at what else we can do. So I think that's a
Absolutely.
really lovely point.
Yeah.
Before we end, I just have a couple questions that are not on this topic at all that I'm asking guests. So the
Yeah.
first one, yeah, surprise. The first one is, how do you support your child's emotional development?
Well, I think the building safety and building security has been kind of a goal of mine in my early, I mean, he's just 2 and he's coming up on 2.5 in a couple months. And I think the two big pieces are understanding that I am the sense of safety for him and I am kind of the protector. And if I can build that strong, secure attachment, I think that will build confidence in him. So that is something that I definitely work on. We just flew down actually to Mexico from Canada, and just the topic of like kids being rambunctious on the planes and stuff came up. And like, I have to say that, of course, I want to be like a kind and courteous person. And if my kid is like punching you or doing something, I would never allow that. But the topic of like kids being loud or inconveniencing, I just absolutely have to stand for my child. Like, I can't suppress him and ask him to be small for the convenience and the comfort of grown adults who know this is temporary. So I would just say, sorry, they're doing construction apparently. So I would just say like that's one thing that I'm really focusing on, is like being his protector, and also really regulating my own emotions, recognizing that this is the biggest opportunity for me to heal my inner child and my inner child wounds, and going through that each time, each day almost with him.
Yeah, it is a daily practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I'm
one
not sure
other
how loud that is on your end, but hopefully not too bad.
No, it's not. It's not too
Okay.
bad on this end.
Okay. Okay.
And what is something that you do to help your child not to be a picky eater, so to love whole foods? Because I imagine that it sounds like you're quite the advocate for eating real whole food. How do you help him become that way as well?
Well, I think I, in an ideal world, my husband and I would have the same taste in food, but we don't. So first of all, is not really setting an expectation or putting out our beliefs around a certain food, right? If my husband's like, oh, like I was taking raw liver and things like that. And my husband's like, that's disgusting. And I was just saying, we're not saying disgusting or gross kind of in front of him. That's our like one thing we try, right? And to just really like, I let him help and pick foods that he wants to do or engage him in the process. Like he's loving making his own smoothies now. So he kind of like picks out what fruit he wants each day to go inside of them, and he'll eat it because he was a part of the process, right? Like kids want to um, be a part of it, and they're like so excited, like I made this. And then the other thing I would say was definitely introducing whole foods and foods that I knew were optimal for his nourishment early on. So I was putting, dehydrated liver capsules into his food, oyster powder for zinc, minerals into his food. I've made all my own like baby food for him and like whatever. So I was just really introducing those things early. And now at, I don't know how old he is, almost 2.5, I give him his protein first. So I put his protein down on his plate and he's hungry. So he starts with that. He loves meat. But if a potato is sitting there, he'll definitely want to have that. And so I just put that down first. That's going to be really nourishing for his body. It's going to stabilize his blood sugar, which will help support his liver. And so I do that. I put down that, and then I put down the rest of his meal secondary to that. So those are kind of my tips.
Yeah, I think you're setting him up really well. That's great. So can you tell us where we can find out more about what you do and a little bit about the way that you do work with women? Because you were mentioning it, but I'd like to hear more about like the course or the one-on-one or like how people can work with you.
Yeah, so I pretty much live on Instagram in terms of where you can find me. Instagram is the_wellness_element. And that has all my links to everything pretty much in my little digital storefront on there. So I would say if you have to get a hold of me or want to know anything, that's the best spot. And I work with women in a few different categories. So I was prior to like really honing in on the pregnancy and morning sickness, I was doing holistic health coaching virtually. So whether or not this applies to you or you just think you align with my take on health, like you can do one-to-one coaching just on one-off calls. So you can book virtually that way. In terms of my morning sickness and HG stuff, I do that in the form of a course. So I'm in transition for the last year and a little bit. I've had a really self-serve DIY course, and I just found like women had a lot of questions. So that's what I've been working on right now is creating and converting over into the blueprint. The blueprint is like my all-encompassing course. As soon as you come into it, you start with this big intake questionnaire that's going to take you about 15 minutes, but it's going to spit out at the end your root causes in the order of which they are most pertinent based on all the symptoms that you recorded in that questionnaire. And then we get on a one-to-one call. We dig a little bit deeper. That's where I really get the opportunity to ask them all those questions. Like I said, when I was writing the things down. And then they're going to work through the course material. There's weekly group coaching calls and access to me in terms of one-to-one support by text. So they can really say like, this is what I tried this week and it's really working or it's not working. Let's pivot, because it is a little bit of figuring it out, right? Like I can give all the best information, but there's always going to be tweaks along the way. So that is really, the course is kind of that blend of you get to do a lot of the material and learning as much or as little as you want. I'm certainly somebody who likes to educate and have you understand, because as soon as you understand, I think you just make choices from such a better informed place, and it's so much easier to connect the dots. But there are some people that are like, oh my God, I can't listen to you talk about this and try to figure it out on my own. So just give me the protocol. So it's a blend of like, if histamine's the issue, there's the histamine protocol where you can just jump into that. But there's also the education that you can sit and sift through behind it and really understand the topic more readily. So yeah, it's kind of about piecing together which of those factors are for you and pulling out the key pieces of that on the protocols and then getting right to work.
Sounds like an incredible, really comprehensive program that people will feel really supported in. So we'll make sure to have the links to all those as well as your Instagram on the show notes. But if was there anything else that you wanted to let us know about before we finish up?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that was like that was probably, one of the most in-depth explaining interviews that I've had. So I guess I understand that this is a lot of information. I understand that there are like someone's head could be spinning now with all of it, but the main takeaway is to remember that your body is not working against you, it's working for you. When it's not working optimally in the way that we would like, we have to ask why, and that I'm just a resource. I'm like the information to help you get that why. And then it's really like, I do really try to support personal responsibility around this and hope that people want to feel empowered and want to take this on as something that's going to better their health and their baby's health and the trajectory for their grandchildren and everything else. So yeah, I think it can be as simple as we need it to be or complex, depending on where you fall on the need to know why spectrum.
Well, thank you so much. And you provided so much information. I think anybody experiencing this or wanting to not experience morning sickness will have so many amazing starting points here. And if they want to dive in further, they can do your program, which sounds great. So thank you so much for being on. And I can't wait for listeners to hear this and to find out what their main takeaways were.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on here. And I'm here if anyone needs me.